We are firmly within the Christmas season, and I wish I had a happier story to share with you today. Just another example of how well the comic book industry is doing. And I don't know, I'm going to talk about a comic book shop that is in a lot of trouble. They have a GoFundMe right now. There's going to be a link in the video description talking about Fat Jack's Comics in Philadelphia, and it breaks my heart. You know, as customers, we've got it bad, right? Marvel and DC are not even trying at this point to really go out there and produce really good comic books. For the most part, the good stuff that happens, I consider to be an anomaly these days. Sure, there are a couple of comic books from DC and Marvel, normally each week, that we can recommend as readable. But there's so much more trash and filler, stuff that nobody would ever want to sniff, let alone read, that's being put out these days on purpose by Marvel and DC. As customers, we can walk away, right? We have alternatives. Hell, I can just get a Netflix subscription. You can watch a lot of superhero content on Netflix. Might not be DC and Marvel, but it is an alternative. You can get Disney Plus. Certainly a lot of Marvel content on there. You get the entire MCU, get a lot of cartoons and stuff like that. You can get HBO Max, got the entire DC movie library of all times. You can get all that wonderful animated stuff. You can say, screw it, I don't want to support Marvel and DC anymore. I'm going to read manga. Or maybe I'm just going to find another hobby that will satiate my appetite. Maybe I'll go be a tabletop gamer now. It's not that hard to find a new hobby, but if you're an owner of a comic shop, you really have it the worst. Because you're really depending on the model of the comic shop that you do have, on Marvel and DC putting out quality content that actually drives people into your shop and make them want to go there on a weekly basis to buy new comic books. And I don't think Marvel and DC are holding up their end of the bargain with their business partners, the local comic shops. Today, I've got another example of a comic shop that's in dire straits and they need your help. This is what they said on their GoFundMe campaign. Well, friends, there's no other way to say this. We're in a terrible situation and we desperately need your help. Forgive me if this is all over the place. Mike didn't want me to ask for help, as we received help before and gotten out of debt. And he's been trying to make it work for the last year and a half, but it's been tough. And I was finally able to convince him to do this. And I'm asking as I'm putting my thoughts down. We are working as hard as we can to overcome the non-existent and slow sales while we were closed. We just can't get there. Right now, we need to put together $20,000 in a hurry. This is not the totality of our problems. That would need at least $80,000. But to keep our heads above water and ensure we can get our new book still, we need to raise these funds as soon as possible to keep moving forward. And if you go and read the entire GoFundMe campaign, they certainly lay a lot of this on the feet of COVID, the COVID shutdowns, which I'm certain hurt a lot of small businesses out there, including basically every mom and pop comic shop that you can think of. Probably were impacted severely by the COVID shutdowns, unless they were in a few key states that really just never shut down, period. And if you were a comic shop owner in one of those states, you should count your blessings, because you didn't have it nearly as bad as a lot of other places where they decided to shut things down for upwards of 2 years. But let's be honest here. The comic book industry in America, led by DC and Marvel Comics, are in terrible shape. I imagine if you go into that comic book shop, they are going to have loads and loads and loads of new comic books that they can't sell for nothing. And it just chaps my ass whenever you see these disingenuous people out there going, it's the best year ever for comic books. Comic books have never sold better. Yeah, technically, if you were to lump everything in with Marvel and DC, yeah, the sales are great. But once you start axing off a little bit of that manga stuff, once you start axing off maybe the Dav Pilkey sales, and you actually look at what Marvel and DC are doing, the stuff that comic book shops actually sell, it feels like they are doing everything that they can to put people out of business these days. They are doing everything that they can to lower interest in their products because they have to push a message. They have to reinvent all their characters for a modern audience, right? We can't just make comic book fans happy. We don't just want comic book fans in those shops. We have to drive them away and bring in a new audience. And it's basically led to the destruction of local comic book shops all over America right now. And anytime I see one of these sniveling morons like a Heidi McDonald or Tim Seeley talking about, oh, there's nothing wrong here, there's nothing wrong, it's only putting people out of business. Comic book shops really can't, transition over to a new hobby. What are they just going to sell tchotchkes now? Oh, they're going to be a t-shirt shop. Oh, so now let's go compete with Amazon. Yeah, that's a really smart business plan. You can't even really go and concentrate on manga right now, because for the most part, American consumers, when it comes to manga, they've been trained to go to Amazon, Walmart, or Barnes & Noble, right? You don't go to your comic book shop for that. The only things that I've seen that are really working right now in the comic book industry is if you have a really big shop. like a really big shop with a really good online presence, and you're able to sell via your e-retailer site, you are probably doing very well, because enough comic book shops have shut down now that comic book readers that would like these things actually have to order them by mail. Another way is to kind of give up on new comic books altogether, go into the back issue market, which costs a lot of money because you have to go and acquire them. You have to go through the entire inventory. You have to price them all out and keep your back inventory flush with comic books people have actually been looking for. It can be very time consuming, but very profitable if you are able to build up a very large stash of really good, desirable back issue comic books. The other thing that's working right now are shops specializing in like variant covers or store exclusive covers and stuff like that. But that is an enormous financial risk because you have to put all the money up front. You don't even know what cover you're going to get. If you're working with DC and Marvel, you don't even know what cover artist you're going to get. You can say these are the cover artists that we would like, and these are the elements that we would like on the cover. But DC and Marvel, they don't actually have to do that stuff. So it's a big risk because you might get a stinker and you might not be able to sell any of those retailer exclusives. You might be sitting on them for a couple years or so. See also what happened with Black Flag Comics. As was mentioned in the GoFundMe campaign, this isn't the first time that Fat Jack's Comics have asked for help. In January of 2019, the Philadelphia Inquirer had an article about it where the owner gave a little bit more information about the issues with the shop. Fat Jack's owner, Mike Ferrero, said increased cost, increased rent, increased health insurance, everything's going up, and we're not really selling at an increased rate in sales. He also mentions in those days, he relied on back issues for 90% of his sales. Thanks to eBay and sites like that, that number was down to about 20% in 2019. If you have a robust back inventory and you don't have a working e-commerce site or an eBay store or something like that, you are absolutely missing out and you're putting your shop in jeopardy. DC and Marvel are screwing these comic book shops over left and right. And you have all these shills out there always making excuses for them. Oh no, there's nothing to see here. There's no less interest. We've only seen every major character at DC Comics outside of Batman drop out of the top 100 the last time we actually got to see sales, which apparently have been blacklisted now. You just can't see comic book sales anymore. Bleeding Cool won't even do their top 10 lists anymore because they're scared. I imagine DC and Marvel reached out to them and said, stop producing that top 10 list because it makes us look bad. We don't want people knowing just how bad our sales have got. They're bad across the board, and DC and Marvel are putting people out of business. Now, I know this is a lot of bad information. I am venting here because it does chat my ass that the people at DC and Marvel who know they're fucking up, that know they're screwing over their business partners, the local comic shops, but do nothing to fix it, they will go on to 50 issues on Captain Marvel that sell absolute dick just to say they did it and not do anything to help out their local comic shops. But I will give you a story that was in that article I mentioned earlier from the Philadelphia Inquirer in 2019 about Nick Barucci. He is the guy behind Dynamite Entertainment. I don't know if you support Dynamite, but if you want to, I would say go out there and support Nick Barucci because apparently he's a good guy. This is what he did. He put his money where his mouth was. He was a good business partner. In fact, he went above and beyond to help this comic book shop out 3 years ago. Perhaps the biggest gesture of support so far has come from Nick Barucci, a longtime Fat Jack's customer who founded Dynamite Entertainment, an independent comic publisher in Mount Laurel. Barucci announced his treasured copy of X-Men #1 would be placed on the auction block. He said, it's one of the most expensive comics I have, and he knew that selling such a high-profile comic would draw attention to the campaign. Now, this isn't like a 9.9 or something like this. This isn't like a $500,000 comic book. I don't want to go out there and say that, but it was X-Men #1. And I can tell you right now, a friend of the channel had a copy of X-Men #1. And when he sold it as an adult, because he acquired it, I believe when he was 9 or 10 years old, he actually bought a house with it. His name would be Doc. That is a very desirable comic book. That is something that if you're a Nick Barucci or somebody that's been a long-time comic book fan, you wouldn't mind having in your collection. Nick Barucci went out there, he put it on the auction block, and he went out there to help a small business that was being screwed over by DC and Marvel, not by Dynamite Entertainment, who appear, from everything that I've seen and I've been reading lately, to be going out of their way to deliver the best comic books that they can possibly deliver out of their stable of writers and with the characters that they do have. And it's really sad that we cannot say the same thing about DC and Marvel. People like to shout from the rooftops that comic books have never been better. The industry's better. DC and Marvel are doing great. You know, I know, we all know, they know more than anybody that they aren't doing great. They're screwing people over. They're putting people out of business left and right because they can't sell their fucking comic books. They're putting shitty writers on these comic books on purpose to make a point, to get a social message out there, but they're never actually trying to sell comic books. They're never trying to please the customer. They're never, ever trying to deliver the best stories possible with the coolest heroes in the entire world, which they do have. It's unfortunate that they just don't care anymore. They don't care about their partners. They don't care about their customers. They don't care about their heroes, their IP. They don't care about any of that. They would see it all burned just so they could find that right audience to drive you and I away, who have been supporting comic books perhaps our entire lives, because you and I were the wrong type of people. But the right type of people don't want to support this industry. Isn't it the weirdest thing you've ever seen in your life? Thank God for people like Nick Barucci, who are out there going above and beyond, trying to help people out, while DC and Marvel are absolutely burning the industry to the ground on a weekly basis with their shitty comic books. I've been talking about this for quite some time here on the channel. I'm sure you know this. Last year, I answered a viewer question about whether the comic book industry was dying and how I personally would fix DC and Marvel comics. I go into a lot of information here. Definitely check this one out, because I've been talking about this for a while. If you don't see the video here, there's also a link in the video description.